Hello everyone. In a very sick septic patient, ferroptosis causes most of the damage that we see. This is an iron-driven, uncontrolled lipid peroxidation. Once the cellular defenses are overwhelmed, the process becomes self-sustaining and self-amplifying, resulting in full-blown multi-organ failure and finally death. At that stage, fixing macroscopic hemodynamic parameters alone doesn't reverse what's happening. Today we'll explore how cells defend themselves against ferroptosis. Understanding these mechanisms is essential if we want to approach therapy in a rational way. Welcome to ICU Physiology Insights, where we go beyond the surface level explanation. In the previous lecture, we learned about ferroptosis, an iron-driven uncontrolled lipid peroxidation leading to cell death. Let me summarize the process in brief. In a very sick ICU patient, what we are really seeing is a runaway chemical reaction inside the cell membranes, which often starts with ferrous iron, generating aggressive free radical formation. These free radicals attack proteins and DNA, but mostly damage occurs when they attack lipids in the membrane, especially the polyunsaturated fatty acids, which cause widespread membrane damage. As the membrane damage breaks down, cells lose their ion balance, mitochondria fail, and energy production stops, and cell dies. At the same time, toxic byproducts like aldehydes are formed, which go on to damage proteins, DNA, and amplify inflammation. Once the cellular defenses are overwhelmed, the process becomes self-sustaining. This is the whole cycle of ferroptosis. So let's understand the cellular defenses. I'll be comprehensive in this and lay out the full range of known pathways so you can appreciate the system's complexity. We'll begin with the redox potentials, which largely determines the reaction rates. Other factors determining the reaction rate include concentration of radicals and antioxidants. Acidosis moves the whole system towards a more oxidizing state. Lipid versus water solubility also matters. For example, vitamin C is a water soluble, therefore ineffective at preventing lipid peroxidation within the membranes. At the core of cellular defense is the glutathione system, particularly glutathione peroxidase 4, which operates at a highly favorable redox potential as shown in this ladder. Additional antioxidant system includes vitamin E, tetrahydrobiopterin, and ubiquinol. Let's start from the first principles. We know that superoxide is continuously generated in mitochondria in small quantities due to electron leak. The superoxide is converted to hydrogen peroxide by superoxide dismutase in mitochondria. During stress or disease, this leak increases, increasing the amount of hydrogen peroxide. The critical defensive step is the reduction in hydrogen peroxide to water, preventing its conversion into highly reactive hydroxyl radical via the Fenton reaction, which uses ferrous iron. This detoxification is primarily handled by glutathione peroxidase, the thioredoxin peroxyredoxin system, and catalase, which together form the first line of defense against excess hydrogen peroxide. We covered these pathways previously when discussing the general ROS handling. In a specific context of ferroptosis, however, glutathione peroxidase assumes the central role. It acts as the gatekeeper by detoxifying lipid peroxide and thereby preventing execution of ferroptotic cell death. Glutathione reduces both hydrogen peroxide and lipid peroxides by donating electron using glutathione peroxidase. This converts these peroxides into relatively stable alcohols. To sustain the system, cells maintain a very high reduced to oxidized glutathione ratio, often exceeding 100:1. Despite this requiring a lot of energy to the cell in form of ATP. Once this ratio falls below 10:1, the cellular redox control is severely compromised and the viability of the cell becomes unlikely. The oxidized glutathione is again reduced to its active form by glutathione reductase, which uses electrons from NADPH. Among its many isoforms, glutathione peroxidase 4 is particularly important. This is primarily present in the cellular and mitochondrial membranes, where it can directly reduce lipid peroxides. Glutathione peroxidase contains selenocysteine residue at its active site. This is where the biological importance of selenium lies. Now, glutathione is synthesized exclusively within the cell, and the synthesis depends upon the availability of the three precursor amino acid, cysteine, glutamate, and glycine. Among these, cysteine is the rate-limiting substrate. Cysteine's supply is tightly controlled. Cells import cysteine via system XC, the glutamate cysteine antiporter. Disruption of this transport system critically impairs redox homeostasis. The subsequent step, catalyzed by glutamate cysteine ligase, is the rate-limiting step of this pathway. This reaction is ATP dependent and subject to feedback inhibition by glutathione itself. Consequently, in state of ATP depletion, the GCL activity declines, further compromising glutathione synthesis. When glutathione peroxidase becomes saturated, the system doesn't abruptly collapse. The cellular redox biology is built with redundancy rather than single points of failure. You must have heard about coenzyme Q10. This molecule primarily functions as an electron shuttle within the electron transport chain, transporting electrons from complexes 1 and 2 to complex 3. In doing so, it cycles between its oxidized form, ubiquinone, and reduced form, ubiquinol. Because it is highly lipophilic, it resides within the lipid membranes, where it can donate electrons to lipid peroxyl radicals, thereby acts as a chain-breaking antioxidant. However, like all antioxidants, this activity is self-limited. Once it donates electron, it becomes oxidized and must be recycled back to its reduced form to remain functional. This is where ferroptosis suppressor proteins become relevant. FSP1 operates independently of glutathione system, using NADH to reduce ubiquinone back to ubiquinol. The regenerated ubiquinol then serves as membrane-localized lipophilic antioxidant that interrupts lipid peroxidation. This mechanistic insight prompted many trials supplementing ubiquinol. While these interventions reliably increased the circulating coenzyme Q10 levels, they did not translate into meaningful clinical benefit. While FSP1 is present in the cell membranes, dihydroorate dehydrogenase is located in the inner mitochondrial membrane near the electron transport chain and performs a function analogous to FSP1. It reduces mitochondrial ubiquinone to ubiquinol, thus sustaining a local pool of ubiquinol within mitochondria. In this way, dihydroorate dehydrogenase acts as a mitochondrial counterpart to FSP1, supporting compartment-specific antioxidant defense. Another enzyme reducing ubiquinone is NADPH quinone dehydrogenase 1. It is present in the cytoplasm and uses NADH or NADPH to reduce any quinones present. In doing so, it helps sustain intracellular levels of ubiquinol. Since it can directly scavenge superoxide radicals as well, it complements the activity of superoxide dismutase. Thus, it helps scavenge the upstream rather than neutralizing reactive oxygen species after they are formed. Another major line of defense is vitamin E. Because it's highly lipophilic, it localizes within the lipid bilayer and functions as a membrane antioxidant. This is unlike vitamin C, which remains confined to its aqueous compartment. Within the membrane, vitamin E intercepts lipid peroxyl radicals by donating hydrogen atom to them, converting them into more stable species. This reaction is roughly 1,000 times faster than the competing reaction between the lipid peroxyl radicals and adjacent polyunsaturated fatty acids. This vitamin E PUFA radical sequence is very well characterized. When a lipid peroxyl radical forms, its increased polarity gives it a dipole-like behavior, so it moves towards the membrane-water interface. This is where the hydroxyl group of vitamin E is positioned. This enables a very efficient interaction between them. The vitamin E then donates a hydrogen atom to this radical and restores the lipid. Since it has lost an unpaired electron along with, it itself becomes tocopheroxyl radical. This unpaired electron is oriented towards the aqueous phase. And this spatial arrangement now allows vitamin C to reduce it back to active tocopherol. So you can see how vitamin E and vitamin C play an electron relay that integrates this lipid phase and aqueous phase redox systems. The next layer of defense involves tetrahydrobiopterin. It's best known as a cofactor for nitric oxide production and maintaining endothelial function, but it also has antioxidant roles. BH4 can donate electron to lipid peroxides, converting them into more stable lipid alcohols. Unlike vitamin E, which is confined to membranes, BH4 is more diffusible and can exert protective effects across multiple cellular compartments. As with other antioxidants, BH4 is oxidized after donating an electron, forming a trihydrobiopterin radical that must be recycled. And here vitamin C rises to the occasion and can reduce this radical back to BH4. In addition, BH4 can be regenerated from BH2 via dihydrofolate reductase in a NADPH dependent reaction. In the previous lecture, we learned that PUFAs are more susceptible to oxidation when compared to MUFA, which are more susceptible than the saturated fatty acid. The reason for this is that CH bond between the two double bond of PUFA have much lower bond dissociation energies than the CH bonds found in MUFA. This makes them more susceptible to oxidation. So there is an advantage of having more MUFA than PUFA in the cell membranes if the cell is developing oxidative stress. Acyl-CoA desaturase 1 converts saturated fatty acids into MUFAs, therefore reduces the proportion of PUFA in the cell membrane. This limits the lipid peroxidation. In earlier discussion, we noted that the enzyme ACSL4 incorporates PUFA into membrane phospholipid. These PUFAs were required for arachidonic and eicosanoid pathways. Since having more MUFA than PUFA is beneficial during oxidative stress, cells have another enzyme from the same family, ACSL3. This enzyme promotes incorporation of monounsaturated fatty acids into phospholipid rather than PUFA. This makes the cell membranes less susceptible to peroxidation. Researchers have noted increased ACSL3 expression during acute inflammation. Under cellular stress, ATP depletion leads to rise in AMP-ATP ratio, which activates AMP-activated protein kinase, which you heard being called AMPK. AMPK function as a master regulator of energy homeostasis. One of its key actions is its inhibition of acetyl-CoA carboxylase, which reduces malonyl-CoA production and downstream fatty acid synthesis, which includes polyunsaturated fatty acids. By limiting this PUFA availability, AMPK pathway effectively reduces the substrate pool for lipid peroxidation, thus reducing fuel for the fire in ferroptosis. However, in conditions such as sepsis, although AMPK pathway is often activated, this protective effect is frequently insufficient and can be overridden by iron-driven oxidative process and autophagy. Cells also deploy membrane repair system as a last line of defense once ferroptosis begins. We learned that lipid peroxidation creates nanoscale pores in the bilayer, leading to sustained calcium influx into the cytosol. This calcium signal recruits the ESCRT3 machinery to the damaged sites, where it assembles and seals these membrane defects. In doing so, it effectively removes the damaged portion and restores membrane integrity. So this system does not halt the lipid peroxidation itself. Instead, it repairs the structural damage, buying more time and potentially delaying cell death. Another protective mechanism is prominent 2 exosome pathway. Under stress, PROM2 expression is upregulated and drives the formation of multivesicular bodies that sequester iron-bound ferritin. These vesicles then fuse with the plasma membrane and release iron-loaded exosomes into the extracellular space. In effect, PROMNIN2 creates a physical route for iron export, allowing the cells to offload the excess iron. In context of ferroptosis, this lowers the intracellular labile iron pool, reduces Fenton reaction activity, and limits free radical formation. Cells regulate coordinated antioxidant response during severe stress. This central regulator is NRF2. Under oxidative stress, NRF2 dissociates from its inhibitor, KEAP1, translocates into nucleus, and binds antioxidant response elements. This drives expression of genes related to antioxidant production, such as glutathione synthesis, NADPH quinone dehydrogenase 1, periredoxins, and hemoxinase 1. Thus, NRF orchestrates a broad defense network, coordinates iron handling, glutathione metabolism, lipid detoxification, and NADPH generation. Finally, because iron is a primary driver of the ferroptosis, cells maintain strict control over its intracellular levels. While iron is essential for normal physiology, its free ferrous form can catalyze uncontrolled free radical generation and cellular injury. To prevent this, cells sequester iron, limit its uptake, and actively export excess iron. This broader topic, cellular and systemic iron regulation, warrants a dedicated discussion. So in the next section, we'll examine why administering IV iron in a septic patient may potentially worsen outcomes. You can see how deeply redundant these systems are. It's not surprising that clinical trials targeting a single pathway rarely produce any meaningful outcomes. In summary, cells reduce the impact of ferroptosis by various simultaneous mechanisms. The most important process involves decreasing formation of hydroxyl radical from hydrogen peroxide. This is achieved by the glutathione system, which converts hydrogen peroxide into water. It also reduces lipid peroxides to stable molecules. Other molecules which reduce the lipid peroxides are vitamin E, ubiquinol, and tetrahydrobiopterin. These utilize vitamin C and enzymes such as FSP1 and DHODH for recycling their oxidized state. Cells increase the amount of monounsaturated fatty acids in their membrane using enzymes like SCD1 and ACSL3. They upregulate AMPK and increase transcription of antioxidants via NRF to ARE pathway. Alongside, they actively transport iron out of the cell using prominent 2 exosome export. Most of these mechanisms aren't emphasized in our medical training, so many of us are unaware of how extensive and interconnected these biochemical pathways really are. And to be fair, keeping up is inherently difficult. The field is vast and evolving rapidly. Fortunately, in current era, information is everywhere and easily verifiable. All you have to do is to ask the right question and think beyond yes or no answers and appreciate the underlying complexity. There are rarely any simple, straightforward answers in medicine. Always stay curious and skeptic. Always look for biological plausibility when you read a study. In the next few sessions, we'll also shift to clinical evidence. We'll review the studies and meta-analysis on antioxidant therapies and break down how to critically appraise them. I've already covered the mechanistic limitation of vitamin C in a prior lecture. That discussion provides a useful framework for understanding why antioxidant strategies in general often fall short. Hope this was useful. Thank you.